I failed the first time, and you may not tell anyone.
In our first look at Star Trek The Next Generation, we looked at the series, its origins, who made it, and its general history. Today we begin a deep dive, or more accurately, an incredibly superficial and shallow dive into the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation.
I was hoping we might learn more about it.
For an overall look at Star Trek The Next Generation, take a look at our first video. This video will contain spoilers for the episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation first broadcast in 1987 and 1988, which formed the first season. So it's most likely the ones that you skip past on a rewatch.
I'm certain of that.
Some aliens are offering Starfleet a one-off complex, Farpoint Station. In investigating, the Starship Enterprise on its first mission sees many of its crew meeting each other for the first time.
But Captain Picard is a pain, isn't he?
Of course, something is amiss. En route to Farpoint, the Enterprise is waylaid by an entity known as Q. Well, this Q isn't deranged, just impish, putting humanity on trial for being savages. Meanwhile, at Farpoint Station, people are finding things that they were thinking of are magically appearing. At first, it's just some fabric or some fruit. How do you like them apples, Riker?
I'll be damned.
It turns out that Farpoint is a bit of a scam, like Harry Mudd Community College, or Harry Mudd's combined retirement community and gold recycling facility. Farpoint isn't actually a station, but an imprisoned space jellyfish looking for love.
The unknown is what brings us out here.
The episode began life as a 1-hour episode, but the studio insisted that the series premiere was a 2-hour movie. Gene Roddenberry took Dorothy Fontana's story of a captured alien and added on the Q sections, which, truth be told, do give the episode a little bit more drive and make this feel like a proper premiere to kick off a new series. The cast are still finding their way with some very stiff performances, partly down to the fact everybody is new, partly down to the fact it's the future, and they felt it would be silly if everybody was speaking like 80s Valley girls, like Grody to the Max. These are characters that most of these actors would play on and off for basically the rest of their lives, so it's a slight shock to the system to loop around to the start of the series and just see how hard it was for everyone to find their feet. Look, imagine it's the first day on Lord of the Rings and Ian McKellen says to Peter Jackson,
"Dear boy, how about I play Gandalf with a German accent?" "Oh yeah, you shall not pass."
Finding the characters was a learning experience for all concerned. Deanna Troi is a lie detector most of the time, but a lie detector who almost doubles over as if she's suffering from crippling food poisoning every time she senses somebody's emotions. Also, she does this in a skirt so short that no one's really paying attention to her acting.
I too could never say goodbye, Imzadi.
Worf says very little other than to remind everybody that he's a Klingon.
"I'm a Klingon, sir."
Denise Crosby in the first episode is a little more intense than believable.
This so-called court should get down on its knees to what Starfleet is!
Like somebody auditioning for a life insurance commercial.
Just a look at the bridge. I'll stay in the turbo lift when the doors open. I won't get off.
Will Wheaton as Wesley is still just an enthusiastic kid who wants to show off his knowledge.
"Get off the bridge."
Jonathan Frakes is so stoic you'd think he was posing for a statue. And look, you're spending all of the time looking, praying even, for a hint of a 5 o'clock shadow. It's almost like you have to avert your eyes because he looks just so wrong without the beard. Frakes in early years was often directed to not have Riker smile as often as Frakes would have liked, which does make him look like somebody whose sole job is to stand by the buffet table ready to wipe down the sneeze guard. Levar Burton seems to have found Geordi with little drama, which is not hard to do in an episode where there is little drama. Gates McFadden also seems somewhat uncomfortable, while first season Dr. Crusher, who, like videos on this channel, is fairly humorless.
Your file says that you're
Machine, correct, sir. Does that trouble you?
To be honest, yes, a little.
Understood, sir. Prejudice is very human.
Brent Spiner seems to get data, but it's the early data, where the character is more childlike than in later seasons, and often used as comic relief. While Michael Dorn's entire existence in the series is down to Gene Roddenberry not wanting to put a woman in charge of the saucer section during the separation. There's even a small unnamed role for Colomini, who'd eventually get a specific character with a name on Next Generation before eventually becoming one of the stars of Deep Space Nine. John de Lancie was probably the person who most had a fix on his character. Q was originally conceived of as a semi-regular rather than somebody who popped up every now and then. Yes, you could call him a carbon copy of Trelane from Squire of Gothos, but Q was one of the new characters who the new production crew got from the beginning. John de Lancie would take a once or twice a season character and turn it into a career. Series star Patrick Stewart seems to have found Picard, but he is still workshopping his accent, trying to work out how much received pronunciation was too much.
Let's see what this Galaxy-class starship can do.
DeForest Kelley makes a lovely cameo appearance as an aged Dr. McCoy being escorted to a shuttle by Data. As a way of letting old school fans know that it was okay to give the new show a try, it's a sweet scene.
Well, this is a new ship, but she's got the right name.
Encounter at Farpoint is one of the few times we see the Enterprise D's unique selling proposition, the saucer separation. The saucer sep is impressive, but it'd only be used a few times throughout the series run. Not once, not twice, not thrice, but once if you count the movie Generations, which we really don't.
Welcome to the Enterprise, Commander Riker.
It's also one of the few times we'd see main cast members in the unisex scant version of the uniform, possibly because actors going commando could have seen episodes banned in some markets. Marina Sirtis would instead gain a unique costume for the series. Scans would be seen on occasion, but mainly on extras, and possibly because they were seen as business up top, but partying below.
We surrender. State that we are not asking for any terms or conditions.
Aye, sir.
Farpoint is a little sluggish, it's clunky, it's wobbly in places, but it does give you a decent idea of what it is you're watching, which for the first season is sluggish, clunky and wobbly, but it's at least a slightly better looking version of the original series with different characters trying desperately hard not to be seen as simple replacements for the original crew.
Just hoping this isn't the usual way our missions will go, sir.
Oh no, number one. I'm sure most will be much more interesting.
Star Trek The Next Generation in early days was often accused of sticking too closely to the original series. It's not surprising when we have a sequel and virtual remake of an original series episode so early on. The Naked Time had the crew lose their inhibition so we could get to see what drove the characters when their guard was down. In The Naked Now, it's the Starship Thirsty Prize. A virus makes almost everyone drunk or horny.
You wanted me?
Or if you're lucky, both, a condition known as drawny. The episode takes time to point out the similarities and differences between the virus in the original episode and here, except in this episode, Tasha and Data get it on. Picard and Crusher almost get it on, and William T. Riker gets nothing. This episode is pretty much where the Wesley saves the day meme was born. So you might think we're just going to tote up all of the times that Wesley the Wunderkind saved the ship, but that's too obvious, even for us. Instead, we'll just count all of the guest actors channeling MacGyver.
Data, I'm only going to tell you this just once. It never happened.
Code of Honor, a terrible episode that the cast have disowned, like a promise to quit smoking the day before a court appearance. An alien culture has something the Federation needs, but the planet's leader kidnaps Tasha, who's then challenged to a duel to the death. Apart from the racism, apart from the acting, apart from the design, apart from the fact the Federation has its hands tied, apart from all of that, it's still not very good. Apart from this bit, which was, yeah, actually that was pretty bad.
Natasha Yar, I challenge you. A struggle to the death.
It is at least one of the very few episodes to feature Tasha in a major role.
Such a waste.
In hindsight, Denise Crosby's future with the series was probably set when this turned out to be the best they could do for her character. But either way, next.
A man goes to a store to buy some kidneys.
Oh, no.
Any Star Trek series lives or dies by the quality of its recurring foes. Not the one-off characters, but the alien races at odds with the Federation who we'll see time and time again. The Next Generation began with Gene Roddenberry saying that he didn't want the show to lean on the Klingons or Romulans every few weeks, which in hindsight does seem somewhat comical.
I seem to have reached an odd functional impasse.
The Ferengi were going to be the Next Generation's big villains, and rather than being sneaky or warlike, their threat was their utter greed. They were meant to be evenly matched with the Federation. Instead, we got some ineffectual trolls who seemed to be about as threatening as a paper bag with the word boo printed on it backwards on the inside of the bag. Armin Shimmerman was one of these first Ferengi, and while the Ferengi would never amount to anything more than a bad smell in the Next Generation, they would positively flourish on spin-off series Deep Space Nine, with Shimmerman turning a loss into a massive win. But he never once says anything like, "Is a Ferengi not entitled to the sweat on his lobes?" The Ferengi would eventually become a massive part of the Star Trek universe, but as annoying frenemies rather than deadly rivals. This episode's one of the first uses of the Stage 16 set, not as a permanent set like the Enterprise interiors, but it could be put together pretty quickly as an alien landscape. I do have something similar in my house, which is nominally the guest bedroom, but it's actually filled with unsold energy drinks. But as they say, you have to waste money to have no money.
There is even more.
An engine upgrade from an arrogant Starfleet engineer seems to make no sense. The specs are gibberish, and it just seems weird that Starfleet would order the Enterprise to undergo the enhancements. But of course, without that, there would be no episode. The ship ends up light years from home, and the only way to get home is if the engineer's alien assistant, the Traveller, uses his magic. And Wesley has some unspoken destiny, and well, some weird stuff is happening. The funniest thing about the episode is how they actually use plot points here for Wesley's eventual destiny, which was not, as fans at the time wished for, unpleasantness involving piranhas and strawberry jam.
Wesley Crusher is made acting ensign with the duties and privileges of that rank.
Spooky things happen. People have hallucinations. Picard sees his grandmother, who, despite being a figment of his imagination, brought to life by being at a far-off point in space, does seem to have all the answers. Almost all television is made up an episode at a time, or a few episodes at a time, with producers and writers usually only having an idea of what they want to do in the current season, if for no other reason than long-term planning is a lot of work on a show where you might get cancelled after 13 weeks. But if you plant enough seeds, you can build on those later. So here, Wesley's eventual destiny is more or less described by the Traveller.
He is just a boy for now. He should be encouraged, but told none of this.
So this is a week where, sort of, something happened. It's not a bad episode, but at the time you didn't really realise that this is going to be one of the better episodes of the season.
Do you have any facts that fit this?
An alien takes over Captain Picard, and he doesn't seem to be resisting all that much. If it was an interesting episode, we'd say it's a metaphor for your pet controlling you. Think this isn't true? Then tell me who has the final say as to when you have to clean up animal excrement.
Are you Jean-Luc?
He is here.
Picard is doing unusual things. The crew start to talk about relieving him of command, and of course, they never have quite enough evidence to displace Picard from the captain's chair, even if Picard is clearly not himself. Picard, of course, is so in love with the idea of seeking out a new life form that he seems quite cool with being turned into a marionette. I'm just waiting for his eyes to start glowing as he mentally communicates with his half-brother Kirano to help him steal Thunderbird 1.
I'm sorry, I really am too busy for this kind of nonsense.
I should point out that Beverly has a new prop. Take a good look, it's not a prop you will ever see again. Also, hands up if you thought of this. Data is on the case in a bit of comic relief, investigating the case of the shiny-headed spaceman.
It's elementary, my dear Riker. Sir.
On the idyllic planet Horny Sigma 8, a planet that seems like Gene Roddenberry projecting somewhat, people are very relaxed about sex. Wesley meets some other teens on the horny planet, and the best thing they can all think of to do is to literally play ball.
About this long, this thick?
It's a little like going to a club in Ibiza and asking the DJ if they can play some Perry Como. The Edo have some arbitrary ideas on crime and punishment, which results in Wesley being sentenced to death.
Death, of course. Don't make it difficult for the boy.
Justice on this planet is absolute. Wesley accidentally breaks a rule and is sentenced to death, and suddenly people at home perked up thinking, wow, shit's about to get real. But then it doesn't. It just doesn't. And just when you think, sod the Prime Directive, the Enterprise can take these horny hippies. The horny hippies have a benefactor who could swat the Enterprise like a fly being swatted by Auntie Norma.
Nice planet.
Star Trek this week was about something. It's a very binary look at the death penalty, where Picard offers good reasons why the penalty shouldn't exist at all, but in this case fails to convince viewers why they shouldn't make an exception in the case of Wesley Crusher.
And I say to any creature who may be listening, there can be no justice so long as laws are absolute.
Having fumbled the Ferengi's introduction, the battle tries to use that fumble to its advantage. A Ferengi daemon, whose late son was defeated by Picard in a battle years before, presents the Enterprise captain with a trophy, Picard's first command, the Stargazer. I mean, that's just generous, because Picard was only expecting a tie. Once again, Picard is acting unusually, and Riker once again is not feeling that there's enough evidence to relieve him of command, which is something we'd see quite a lot. Should Riker, and this might sound passive-aggressive, should Riker just wait till Picard got in a turbolift and then engineer a fault until they could work out what was wrong with the captain? They could have also gone with stunned Picard with a phaser and dealt with the court-martial later, or he could have, well, this is why we aren't writers. The story unfolds the way it does. And because this is Star Trek and not 24, you have to talk the captain down. That's the preferred option.
Damn.
Wesley finally gets his own uniform, which does make a change from the giant sweaters that Grandma Crusher had been knitting him, where she was clearly using the man who cleans her pool as a sizing guide. Hyde and Q sees the return of a fan favourite character. Can you guess Q it is? Oops, what a giveaway. Q returns to troll the Enterprise crew by giving Riker the powers of a Q, and at no point does he ever give himself a beard. I mean, what's up with that?
We have a quality of growth.
Will Q offers Worf a date, Geordi some eyes, Wesley a growth spurt, but nobody's taking that monkey paw. Nope. And then everything is back to normal. And by back to normal, we mean viewers going back to sighing, well, it might get good next week. So, not good, not bad, not great, not terrible, neither amazing nor interminable, just a bit obvious, like my attempts at recording a Swedish language audiobook version of Das Boot. Haven sees Troy's mother, Lwaxana, turn up to sort out Deanna's arranged marriage. Lwaxana Troy is meant to be over the top, annoying, embarrassing, and like my skateboarding great aunt Lana, a mobile cringe factory. Deanna is alerted to her wedding via a messenger played by Armin Shimmerman. The time of her prearranged wedding fast approaches.
The captain's highly attracted to me, but he's a little too old.
Troy is sad at the prospect that she'd have to leave the Enterprise. Then she meets her intended, Wyatt, who seems like an okay fella. Not sure about the mullet, but whatevs. I mean, she can work with that. I mean, it's an 80% MacGyver, but with the right highlights and a hairdryer, she could get that to 100%. The impending nuptials are problematic, with Wyatt's family being human and Lwaxana insisting on a traditional Betazoid wedding, which of course means everybody's in the nude.
I have seen this face ever since I was a boy.
Wyatt's a doctor, but he's also an artist, where he keeps drawing a woman that he's seen in his dreams, which turns out not to be Deanna, which is slightly awkward. Then a plague ship shows up and the people of Haven want Picard to shoot it down. What's more, the woman of Wyatt's dreams happens to be there on the bridge of the plague ship. So you can see where this is going. So this is an episode that's meant to be comedic with a touch of fantasy romance, and it's reasonably decent for the season. Lwaxana Troy begins as a vortex of comedic chaos, a character who wouldn't be out of place in a farce. Later on, the character would go from horny telepathic widow in comedy episodes to having all of her bluster and bravado as a cover for something more poignant in the storytelling. Troy Sr. allows Majel Barrett, yes, Mrs. Gene Roddenberry, a chance to stretch herself as an actor in a way that she hadn't previously done in other roles. As the first Betazoid we've seen since Troy, you'll notice that she doesn't attempt a similar accent to Deanna, which annoyed Marina Sirtis when she was told, oh, but you have your father's accent, which was a deflection that worked until later on her father did appear in an episode with, hey presto, no accent. You'll eventually notice Deanna's accent disappearing altogether after a few seasons, though as Marina Sirtis was from London, she'd still be performing with an affected accent. It's just meant to be American. I dig, I too perform with an affected accent. My real accent is Manitoban mixed with hints of Mauritian, Manchurian and Mancunian, because my great-grandfather was a sailor who had a paternity suit in every port.
I don't understand.
Having introduced the holodeck in the pilot, it's taken until halfway through the season to actually do something with the concept.
I'm delighted with how the holodeck has created the fictional world of Dixon Hill.
Picard spends time role-playing as Dixon Hill, a character from a hard-boiled noir novel. And wouldn't you know it, things go wrong. And now the jeopardy from the holodeck is real. The holodeck without safety protocols is like a television set that shoots crossbow bolts at your head whenever the antenna loses a signal in a storm. The thing about Star Trek The Next Generation is that anytime somebody enters a holodeck after the opening titles, you know shit's going down. It's less reliable than the transporters, a device that if it goes wrong, will make you regret your choices in life insurance coverage. The holodeck's safety record is dodgier than that of a cardboard booster rocket. The Big Goodbye was the first episode to win awards, notably the Peabody Award for writer Tracy Torme, who at the time was on the writing staff. But he'd be one of the many to leave after working on the show for 2 seasons, where he would go on to later co-create the series Sliders. Lawrence Tierney often played scary, gruff characters that everybody seemed afraid of, while the actor Lawrence Tierney was a scary, gruff actor that everybody seemed afraid of. He's an angry Ben Grimm without the cosmic rays.
He's from South America.
Data Law sees Data finding his older brother Law. Law has emotions that Data lacks, but he's also a sociopath ready to double deal and betray anyone. He is a cat in android form. Law is already responsible for the destruction of a colony after he worked with the crystalline entity. Brent Spiner gets his first showcase episode. His first and definitely not his last. Having an evil twin is a pretty old idea, but at the very least he doesn't end up with a goatee.
The troublesome little man-child. Are you prepared for the kind of death you've earned, little man?
Star Trek's effects teams would have a lot of fun over the next decade showing characters meeting some form of double. Spiner seems to be having a grand old time playing a duplicitous sibling, and in following decades would play many versions of Data as well as his siblings and family members of his creator, Dr. Soong. It's also one of the first major uses of CG in a Star Trek series.
You must observe all human customs. Champagne?
Angel 1 is where the season starts to get bogged down with episodes that are more often than not mediocre, forgettable, or just plain dull. Take in a deep breath and hold on tight, we're gonna get through this. They're not all bad, but only a few are better than average. A female-dominated society lets Jonathan Frakes give us his stink eye, that look of bemusement when something unexpected happens.
Actually, it feels quite comfortable.
Here it's women running a society, and one of them is Patricia McPherson from Knight Rider. And as it's late 1987, we have another entry for this week's guy who totally looks like MacGyver but isn't MacGyver. Are you sure? Because no, it's not MacGyver. I'm pretty sure. Enterprise shows up to rescue the survivors of a ship that had crashed some time ago, but now those survivors have stirred up trouble. It also gets messy when some of the survivors have married the local women. Meanwhile, something has to happen on the Enterprise, and everyone's got a cold. Yeah, it's a serious cold. It's gone viral, threatening everyone on the Enterprise, which means they can't help the away team, or be where they need to be to deal with a potential Romulan threat. It's a virus, but it's spread by smell. I think I've been on a bus like that in the summer, which doesn't help Riker all that much because on the planet there are about to be some executions. It's an underwhelming episode. There is nothing close to whelming here. If you were looking for some standard of whelming, perhaps you're looking to be overwhelmed, so look elsewhere. 10110, this one. Okay, so I did mislead you about a run of crap episodes since 1100-1001 is pretty good. The Enterprise is taken for a joyride by the computerized Binars who were pretending to be upgrading the ship's computer. They apparently need a very large mobile hard drive, and Seagate's been out of business for 250 years. But the real story is Riker's perfect distraction on the holodeck, Minuet. And of course, Picard trying to harsh Riker's buzz by overanalyzing everything.
The sophistication of this programming is remarkable.
The holodeck is the main part of the story, and we get to see Riker be an actual human, rather than just the character who's given all of the action scenes. Watching Picard and Riker set the self-destruct to try and get their way out of trouble seems like it only works when your foe is malicious.
The Enterprise has the only mobile computer large enough to handle all that information.
Not a massive stakes episode, but an example of how the show could, at this time when everything was working, do a solid, even better than average episode when they really tried hard enough. This ended up as a bad episode with easily the worst old age makeup of any Star Trek series. The plot's really simple. An aging admiral has a process for de-aging himself, but he gets caught up in a long-standing beef. It's just such a forgettable episode since it's mainly about our crew reacting to the guest artists. Here they cast a young actor and aged him up, which in this case is about as successful as Colt Seaver's attempt to arrest Bigfoot. We're in the first season of the series and we're already ignoring the regulars for a show about this one-off admiral who we'll never ever see again. As for any tips about de-aging, I prefer bathing in sturgeon spawn. It's a cursed episode that never really works in any way. Sometimes, try as you might, things don't always work out the way you expect them to. Just ask Admiral, not MacGyver. I can sympathise. I once had a car that I could not sell and I just decided to wreck it for the insurance money. So I just parked it on a hill and left the handbrake off. Now, turns out, for that to work, you need to park the car at the top of the hill. A barren, technologically advanced society wants to kidnap kids off the Enterprise, and one of them is Wesley. I mean, if you're going to have some sort of conflict in the episode, either follow through or don't tease us. Here is an episode that's less about the pain of losing children, it's more about the audience feeling the pain of when they get them back. Poor Wesley, there are very few kids on the Enterprise his age. He's an acting ensign, yet he still has to sit at the kids' table. Jerry Harden and Brenda Strong are some of the childless kidnappers who are childless no more. Their technologically advanced society can hold off the Enterprise, but they have no wish for war and instead hope to negotiate a price for the kids. I mean, one might say, take the money, Beverly, and just go off with Picard and make another kid. Now, I don't want to suggest that will ever happen at some point in the future. Ever. Or maybe When the Bow Breaks is not irredeemably awful, but quite skippable. The Enterprise encounters a new life form. Well, stop the presses, it's a glowing flashlight, and some terraformers led by General Gogol are potentially wiping out a new species. This is what Star Trek is about, but at the same time, this is also a lousy episode, and the idea is probably better suited to a short story in a book than a television episode.
Mostly giants, bags of mostly water.
I mean, it's a good description of humans. I'm not going to be offended or anything by these lousy, disappointing Christmas tree lights. Coming of Age does two things. It gives us a rather slight story where the crew of the Enterprise are grilled by Lieutenant Commander Dexter Remick on behalf of Admiral Quinn, who, after everybody's been grilled, has to admit there's absolutely nothing wrong with the Enterprise crew. Bo Duke does try to steal a shuttle, but apart from that, nothing much else happens. Quinn leaves a vague note of something being up with the Federation, and that's it. The other part of the story is Wesley taking an admissions test to get into Starfleet Academy early, which is solid enough. Wesley doesn't get in, since there are apparently even more annoying child geniuses waiting to get into Starfleet. The inquiry on the Enterprise could have easily turned into a clip show. The Next Generation is above such things. Damn it. This episode does at least set up a far better episode at the end of the season. The Wesley parts about his entrance exams are probably the stronger parts of the episode.
It's a good thing you're cute, Wesley, or you could really be obnoxious.
It's about time we saw the Klingons. After Gene Roddenberry was dead set against reusing foes from the original series, some Klingon renegades show up wanting to take over the ship, and Worf has to decide if he's a true Klingon or just a Starfleet officer. After the bungling of the Ferengi's introduction, it would indeed fall to old foes like the Klingons and the Romulans to prop up Star Trek's hive of villainy, at least until the next season. It's Michael Dorn's first real chance to do anything other than growl or offer a bit of comic relief. Probably the best way to look at the character of Worf is having him interact with other Klingons. Klingons had been popular foes, but before this we really knew very little about them other than they were warlike. Next Generation would take warlike and flesh that out to the point where you could actually take courses in speaking Klingon, a skill that on the surface may seem utterly useless, but it's very helpful in getting you out of jury duty. It's early days, so you can still see all the bits where they introduce something and then forget about it later. And it's Vaughn Armstrong's first appearance in a Star Trek series.
You are no Klingon!
Perhaps not.
The episode begins with Geordi live streaming from his visor, making sure that everybody on the Enterprise bridge that day would visit sickbay with a terrible migraine. Arsenal of Freedom splits up the crew on a planet where arms manufacturing was their main industry. Every new planet or race in Star Trek's universe from Next Generation had one defining trait, and then that was it. It would be like saying New Zealand's biggest export are actors and musicians that Australians can claim as their own. A shampoo bottle is the ultimate weapon, being able to adapt to any situation. Dry scalp, flaky skin, dandruff, and then come back with a better version. Then there's the big version attacking the Enterprise with Geordi, a junior grade lieutenant left in command, and aside from dealing with big shampoo, has to fend off a challenge from a more senior officer. Beverly falls down a hole, and Picard has to treat her wounds. In an episode designed to show just how close they are or could be, or potentially would be, but for a long time the series could never really make its mind up if these two were an item or not. Symbiosis is the one about drug addicts and dealers, but not actually explicitly about that, with two stars of The Wrath of Khan, Judson Scott and Merritt Buttrick, showing up, again on opposite sides. Tasha's big just say no speech that she gives to Wesley is,
drugs can make you feel good.
Certainly something. Again, the big driver of drama is the Prime Directive. Picard finds a very Weasley way to get around that, and it's about as satisfying as reading an instruction manual for a spork. A moving amorphous blob called Armus is the most evil thing in the universe and has trapped Deanna Troi in a crashed shuttle. The creature is malicious, it swallows Riker, and even kills Tasha Yar. I mean, she's not just dead Jim, she's dead Jim. Like, really dead. Really, really, really dead. And not at the end of the episode, and not heroically. Just killed halfway through the episode because Armus is just that sort of lump of shit.
She's gone.
Gone.
The effects are pretty decent for showing us such a creature, something that's just so odious, you can just see it selling used cars.
And just how much do you worthless creatures think it would take to get into one of these babies? I eat babies.
Tasha's totally pointless death was meant to be a big deal, but having watched the season, it's very hard to remember much of Tasha doing anything at all after the first few episodes, which, based on the episodes so far, pretty much anybody in the entire cast could say the exact same thing. She's sort of there reminding people that she's in charge of security. Denise Crosby likewise couldn't see why she was there and asked to be written out. Denise Crosby half-jokingly suggested they just make a mannequin to stand at her station, since 90% of the time on the bridge they could only see Yar's legs in shot behind Patrick Stewart. Denise Crosby would return in various forms in future episodes. Episodes where Yar is far more important to the story than she was in almost every episode of the first season. Tasha's given a send-off whereby she happens to have recorded a message that's absolutely perfectly timed for the day she happened to die, which is something that happens a lot apparently. I know I record an updated video message for my own funeral every single day, but boy does it chew up a lot of my Google Drive. The episode started off as an idea by Joseph Stefano, who'd been the screenwriter for Psycho and a writer-producer on The Outer Limits. Psycho was based on a real-life killing. If Skin of Evil was based on anything or anyone specific, I would immediately be changing my diet. Something Star Trek always likes to do is bring in somebody's ex to spice things up. Here Picard has to face an old girlfriend whose husband's time experiments have gone wrong. And well, there's not really much more than that. It's slight, it's okay, but it's forgettable, like hitting your head on the roof of a car while getting out. Look, it's okay once, but don't do it too often. Fortunately, I've never once hit my head on the roof of a car, or at the very least I have no memory of ever having done so. The episode also features former Mamas and the Papas member Michelle Phillips as the Mrs. Picard that wasn't meant to be. The episode's writers wanted something romantic for Picard, but that was toned down when the men on the staff and Patrick Stewart were uncomfortable with the idea. So we get something that's really slight, like a very special episode of Care Bears. The romance part ends up as a wistful remembrance of a meeting with an ex who's unavailable, and the science fiction part is, well, I've already forgotten what it was about. Patrick Stewart had already had a long career in the UK, having been part of many prestige productions, though often as a supporting player. The Next Generation was a starring role for Patrick Stewart, and in acting terms, that's considered the head of the company. What that is an unofficial role that more or less sets the tone for the type of set for the actors. Patrick Stewart was used to actors being incredibly focused and serious while working. On the other hand, the rest of the cast were used to American sets where they would blow off steam in between takes or while waiting for camera and lighting setups. Patrick Stewart at one point got so worked up that he admonished his castmates for mucking around on set, that they were there to work and not have fun.
You claim to be a civilized world, and yet you've just committed an act of utter barbarity!
And so yes, for a time, Patrick Stewart was the guy in the movie theatre shushing everybody for laughing during airplane. Stewart eventually realised his inflexible attitude was incompatible with the long days of working on a Star Trek set, and eventually learned to relax and enjoy himself. History does not record whether Patrick Stewart ever pissed himself while watching Airplane.
And we may never know.
Okay, finally, Star Trek The Next Generation takes off the gloves.
I believe it is a clandestine attempt to control vital sectors of Federation territory.
All season, you felt like the storytelling has been conducted with everybody having one arm tied behind their back, where the series' potential just seemed to be just out of everybody's grasp. Here's an episode where restraint was in very short supply, and I love it. The conspiracy alluded to in Coming of Age comes to a head. Picard is invited to a secret meeting of Federation captains on a remote planet. Again, something's wrong with the Federation, but before you know it, some of the meeting attendees meet with unfortunate accidents. Zapping back to Earth, it becomes clear that Admiral Quinn is actually part of the conspiracy.
It is a superior form of life.
Superior?
Parasitic alien lifeforms have taken over several senior Starfleet officials as part of an invasion, which is ended by blowing up Commander Remick. This did not go down too well at the time, and producers were told to tone it down a bit, which is a shame, not because I'm a gorehound, but because this is the first episode to portray some real form of jeopardy. Also, I do guess that filming this meant you'd be picking out bits of flesh from your hair for months.
Is what makes this anecdote so amusing. Yes. Very humorous indeed.
It is nice to have Picard and Riker on a mission together, which was something that you rarely saw. Take a good look, because it would be a while before Next Generation would get your heart racing like this episode. The first season ends, not with a bang, and it's not really a whimper, but it's a very quiet episode. Something's attacking outposts along the neutral zone, but first the Enterprise finds a malfunctioning satellite with 3 20th century humans in suspended animation. So it's a small episode about 3 people finding themselves in the 24th century.
This is the 24th century.
Material needs no longer exist.
But we also hear from the Romulans for the first time in a long time, where they make an appearance to remind us that they're around. They're being played by genre favourites Anthony James and future Gul Dukat, Mark Alimo. The show also sets up a new foe for the Federation, but since the money for the season had run out, we would have to wait until next season to find out more.
We are back.
And you're going to have to wait until we get around to watching Season 2 to find out even less.
Engage.
If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit amphetamines.
Shush.